Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim teaches you English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying. In this week's episode for B1, B2, and C1 students of English, I am going to tell you about how to talk about experiences, accomplishments, and completed work using the present perfect verb tense. I have been teaching English as a second language for almost 20 years now, and in my experience, the present perfect is one of the verb tenses that students have the most problems with. One of the biggest problems that students have with the present perfect is that they don't understand when to use it or the past simple or the present simple. They confuse those three verb tenses. There are two reasons why the present perfect causes problems. The first is that it is used in a lot of situations, and the second is that those situations aren't always extremely different from when we would use other verb tenses. It's something you really need to focus on. At the same time, I do also want to point out one positive or easy thing about the present perfect. It is that it is not very complicated to form the present perfect. It's true, you do need to know your participles, and they are harder to learn than a lot of people think, but you always use a subject and then have or has and then a past participle. There's nothing really complicated here. We will talk about all those details a little bit later, though. Okay, during my time as an English teacher, I have seen people successfully learn the present perfect. So I talked about the difficulties, but I have seen success. And here is what you can do to succeed at the present perfect. First, pay close attention to the details. Second, learn using lots of examples. And third, don't hurry. Don't try to learn all of the situations where you need the present perfect in a single lesson or a single day. It's too much. In fact, in this episode, where I only talk about 3 of them out of about 6 or 7, that is already kind of a lot of information, and I really strongly recommend that if your brain starts to feel tired during this episode, turn it off. Come back to it later. You will learn only if your brain is fresh on this topic. Okay, now I will start directly with 12 examples of the present perfect. At first, we will use these examples just to understand how to construct present perfect sentences and to get the idea of the sentences in your head a little bit. We will come back to why these sentences are in the present perfect later in this episode. So here they are, 12 examples. 1. Yes, I have jumped out of an airplane before. 2. I've used a compass many times. You don't need to tell me how. 3. I've swum in the ocean a few times, but believe it or not, I prefer swimming pools. 4. They know Paris well because they've been there before. 5. I've never run a marathon, but I have run several half marathons. 6. She has written and published 7 books. 7. My mom started teaching in 1984, and she has taught over 3,000 kids. 8. I've taken apart my own computer a couple of times, but am not confident enough to take apart yours. 9. Has everyone gotten food and been to the bathroom already? 10. Tommy still hasn't done his math homework. 11. I hope that everyone has read the email that I sent. 12. Have you taken out the garbage yet? Okay, so let's take one of those 12 sentences and use it as an example of how we construct the present perfect. Here's the sentence now. Yes, I have jumped out of an airplane before. Okay, so the person in the sentence that does the action is I. By the way, a person in a sentence who does an action is called a subject. So in other words, the subject is I. And then after the subject I, we have the auxiliary verb, have. And then there is the main verb, the most important verb of the sentence, jumped, which is a past participle of jump. So a present perfect sentence consists of a subject, then the auxiliary have, and then a past participle. Let's talk specifically about the past participle jumped. Jumped is a regular past participle, which means that it has the ending D or ED. The D or ED ending is pronounced in 3 different ways, and people sometimes make mistakes with these 3 pronunciations. Also, if we are talking specifically about the past participle jumped, it ends in 3 different consonants, one after another. M, p, t. Past participles that end in 2, 3, or even 4 consonants are hard for a lot of people to pronounce. And it's not just students from Japan or Korea that find this difficult. I also hear students from European countries who have this problem. I made a whole episode about this problem of consonants one after another at the end of past participles. That was episode 116. I strongly recommend that you listen to episode 116 if you have not already. Before we move on, I want to say that we also use have not just with the subject I, but also with the following subjects: you, we, and they. So I have, you have, we have, and they have. And if we want to talk about short forms, they will be I've, you've, we've, and they've. Okay, we've learned that present perfect sentences include a subject, then a form of have, and then a past participle. Of these 3 things, let's now focus on subjects. Often, people actually make mistakes with subjects, so we will focus on them for a while. If you want, you can also at any time skip the part about subjects and listen to the next part of the episode where I explain about the different situations where you use the present perfect. Still, I do think it's a good idea for you to listen about the subjects because people often think that everything is fine with that, and that's usually not the case. In any case, all right, let's talk about another sentence in the present perfect. The next sentence that we will analyze is, she has written and published 7 books. In this sentence, the subject is she. And with the subject she, we use a different form of the verb have. We use has instead. So, she has, also, he has, and it has. Also, subjects which mean the same thing as she or he mean that we need to use has also. So if we are talking about one boy or one man, we use has. So, Thomas has been to France a couple of times. Jonathan has never left the country. And if we are talking about one woman or one girl, then we also use has. Maria has already eaten dinner. Crystal has baked over 10,000 cookies. There are 2 more interesting things in the sentence, she has written and published 7 books. The first interesting thing is that we use 2 different past participles, and the second one is that one of those past participles is irregular. The irregular one is written from the verb write. If you want to use the present perfect correctly, you need to know the irregular past participles well. That is why I made a whole episode to help you learn those irregular past participles. It was episode 115. Now let me bring your attention to one last subject. That subject is everybody or everyone. Logically, you would probably think that everybody and everyone mean the same thing as they, but in reality, we use these 2 pronouns with has. So they have, but everybody has, everyone has. One example, has everybody read the email I sent? Okay, now we are finally done with subjects. Let's move on to the next topic, which is how to make a few different sentence types in the present perfect. Fortunately, making questions and negative statements and so on is pretty easy in the present perfect. Let's start with a negative statement. Here it is. Tommy still hasn't done his math homework. So, making negative statements is easy. You just need to add not after have or has. So, I have not, she has not. Or with contractions, I haven't, she hasn't. Now let's make a yes-no question. Have you done your homework yet? So, as you could hear from this question, the first word in a present perfect question is have or has. So, have or has, then the subject, then the past participle. Okay, those are the sentence types that we find most often in the present perfect, and honestly, they all are pretty easy. So let's now talk about 3 similar situations where you can use the present perfect. We're done with the construction, so let's move on to the situations where we use present perfect. 3 situations are life experiences, accomplishments, and completed work. There is one thing that connects all of those 3 things, and it is that all 3 of them are about the results that we have in the present from actions that happened in the past. Okay, the first situation is when we talk about life experiences. What is a life experience? A life experience is something interesting that a person has done in their life, something that maybe most people never do. For example, jump out of an airplane, or sleep on a mountaintop, or ride a motorcycle or a horse. Now let's imagine that you are going on a big walk in the mountains with your friends. All of you are experienced walkers, but there is one new person in the group. Someone starts to explain to her how to use a compass, that the arrow on the compass always shows north, and how to understand which direction you're walking in. The new person feels a little bit impatient with this explanation and says, "I've used a compass many times, you don't need to tell me how." So again, I've used a compass many times. In that last sentence, the life experience is using a compass. This experience is clearly in the past, but the person does not say anything about when his experience of using a compass happened. That is because his focus is on the present, not the past, and the focus is on the fact that he still remembers how to use a compass right now. Okay, let's imagine another situation. You're hoping to go next Sunday to a small local airport so you can jump out of a plane with a parachute. You call the company that does the jumps and they ask you about your experience. The person on the phone says this: "Have you ever jumped out of an airplane, or will it be your first time?" Again, the speaker says nothing about when the action happened. They don't care too much about when it happened, they just want to know if you have ever done that, if you have ever done it in your whole life. It doesn't matter when. Probably the thing that the person on the phone is most worried about is you getting scared because it's your first jump and then panicking and doing something that could cause a deadly accident. And if you have jumped once in the past, then you probably are at least a bit familiar with what happens when you jump. So again, what matters to the person on the phone is whether you still have that experience or memory right now, and not when you did it. So let's imagine a third situation. You're working at a big company in Great Britain, and it's your job to organize all travel for employees. You're sending a group of 3 workers to Paris, and you have given them only basic instructions about how to travel in the city. Your boss checks your work and expresses some worry about the fact that you gave only minimal information. But you know these 3 travelers well, and so you tell your boss this: "Don't worry, they know Paris well because they've been there before." So once more, we say nothing about when these people were in Paris, nothing about when they were in Paris, although we know it was in the past. You are focusing instead on the fact that they still remember how to navigate in that big city. That's what the sentence, "they know Paris well because they've been there before," that's what that sentence means. It's also possible to talk about experiences that people don't have. For example, you can say, "I've never swum in the ocean before." That's about an experience you don't have. You might say this sentence because, for example, you're telling someone about why you're so excited about your next trip to Florida. You're excited because you don't have that experience of swimming in the ocean, but soon will have it for the first time. Before we move on to the next situation where we use the present perfect, let's talk about a few words that you've heard in these examples. You heard ever, never, and before. All of these words are often used in the present perfect. Okay, we are ready for our second situation where we use the present perfect. A second and very similar way to use the present perfect is to talk about accomplishments. An accomplishment is something that is difficult to do and also important. For example, writing an article or book, or running a marathon, or changing the oil in your car. These are all accomplishments. And now that I think about it, completing university, or even just going to university, is an accomplishment for a lot of people. Now, here's the situation. Let's say that you are at a cafe, and you hear the 2 people next to you talking about bicycling and swimming. You join their conversation and that you like doing both of those things, and that you sometimes go long distances. You explain to them that you are making progress and getting stronger. You tell them this: "I haven't run a marathon yet, but I have run several half marathons." So again, it's the same pattern. You don't say when because the when isn't really important. What matters is that right now, in the present, you remember how it feels to do that and could run a half marathon again. Another situation. You work in human resources, and working with your boss, you are trying to decide right now which person to hire for work in the advertising department. You are talking about one candidate that you think would be a great choice. You want to explain why one specific person is a great choice, and you say this: she has written over 100 songs and has sold some of her work for use in advertisements. Same thing. We say nothing about when this person wrote the songs because the focus is not on the past. The focus is on the present and the fact that this person still has the experience, the accomplishment of writing 100 songs and selling some of them. The candidate still remembers how to do those things now, and that's why we can trust her to do the same things again in the company. Another example, you're talking about what an amazing person your mom is and all the great things she has done in her life. You say this about her: my mom started teaching in 1984 and she has taught over 2,000 kids. Okay, it's true that in one part of the sentence, you do say about a specific moment in the past, in this case, 1984, but the part of the sentence that is in the present perfect does not include information about when the events happened. In that part of the sentence, you say nothing about the time. You just talk about the fact that your mom can be proud to have this accomplishment in her heart, in her mind, and in her memory right now. It's not about the past, it's about her abilities and memories that she has about that right now. So, in the meaning of the present perfect where we talk about accomplishments, we often hear numbers, how many of something a person has done, like she's written over 100 songs. My mom has taught over 2,000 kids. My friend Grant has baked over 10,000 cookies. Someone has taken apart their computer a couple of times. When we talk about accomplishments, we often talk about more than one of them, so you'll often hear numbers with this meaning. All right, let's now talk about the final use of the present perfect for this week's episode. In this meaning, we talk about work that is completed or finished. So, let's imagine that you are a high school teacher, and right now you are with your students on a bus trip to a nearby city. You organized the bus trip, and you are responsible for the kids all being safe and having a good time. Right now you are in the bus, parked next to a big gas station with bathrooms and lots of food choices. You gave the kids a chance to get food for themselves and to go to the bathroom and want to make sure that everyone has done what they needed to do so you don't have to stop the bus again. All of the kids are back on the bus now, and you ask everyone this: has everyone gotten food and been to the bathroom already? So when you ask everyone that question, you want to know if everyone right now still has the results, that no one is going to be hungry or need to go to the bathroom for at least a while. Okay, here's another situation. You have a son named Tommy, and he hates doing his math homework. Your partner wants to tell you that Tommy is going to play PlayStation, but Tommy is only allowed to do that after doing his math homework. And so you say this: but Tommy still hasn't done his math homework. The idea here is that Tommy does not have the result of completing his math homework. It's still possible for him to do it, but that has not happened yet. So no math homework, no PlayStation. He could do it in the future, but not yet. Here is a final situation. You work in a small office with 10 or 12 other people. You're the boss, and you recently learned that the building has some problems with its electrical system. The building needs some work, and for that reason, the office will be closed on Thursday. You sent everyone an email telling them to work from home on Thursday. Right now, you're in a meeting with everyone around a table and tell them this: I hope that everyone has read the email that I sent. So, there is no talk about when people read the email. You don't really care if they read that email today or yesterday or during the weekend. Any of those days is good because the thing that is important is that your employees have the result of reading the email now. And of course, the result is that they know what to do on Thursday. Stay home. In this third meaning of the present simple, the words that we often use together with in this third meaning of the present perfect, The words that we often use together with the present perfect are already, yet, and still. Okay, that is all of our situations and examples and words for this episode of Master English with Tim. But there's one more small thing we need to talk about. I'm sure that at least some of you, while you were listening, were thinking, now wait a minute, how is this different from the past simple? Couldn't I just use the past simple? Well, the answer is that we use the past simple more in situations where we are telling stories. And in stories, we talk about one event, and then a second event or action that happened after the first, and then a third one that happened after the second, and so on. For example, I got up, then I made some coffee, and turned on the TV, and watched the news, and then drove to work. After I got to work, I checked my emails, and so on. The past simple is usually about one thing happening, and then another. The present perfect, on the other hand, is used to say or ask about if we have a result now from a single action in the past. That's all for this week. I'll see you all next Monday. Thank you so much for listening.